everyone for joining us again. We have a relatively light agenda, so we'll do our best to stay on time and get everyone's feedback on the items in the agenda. At this time, I'll hand it over to our wonderful interpreter, Gloria, who will give instructions on how to access interpretation.
Muy buenas tardes. Ahorita les voy a dar las indicaciones para poder acceder a la información. Si están en una tableta, pueden buscar los 3 puntitos para donde dice More, M-O-R-E, para poder, para poder acceder a la interpretación. En la parte de abajo, en rojo, en círculo rojo, dice Language Interpretation. Entonces, y luego van al siguiente cuadrito donde muestra inglés-español, y ustedes pueden elegir el idioma que quieran, en este caso tal es el español. Y luego, si tienen una computadora, solamente escogen donde está el mundito y de nuevo inglés o español para su interpretación. Y si están en un teléfono inteligente, por favor, los 3 puntitos le hacen clic y les va a aparecer ahí también Language Interpretation, al igual que en la tableta, y escogen su idioma. Si tienen algún problema, nos escriben en el chat. Gracias.
Gracias, Gloria. Si necesita interpretación, if you need translation or you're monolingual, please select a channel with the language of your choice. Thank you so much. Can someone confirm that the interpretation channel is working, please?
Sí, se escucha. Sí.
Gracias. Gracias. Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you, everyone. If you're joining a little late, this is the January meeting of the Portside Community Steering Committee. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Like I said earlier, it's a relatively light agenda. We'll have a few updates from the Air District and talk through some charter updates and hear some air monitoring updates from the Air District as well. Next slide, please. As mentioned, these are the main objectives for today's meeting. We're going to begin a discussion on any updates we'd like to see in the charter. Following that, the Air District is going to provide an update on the air monitoring efforts in the Portside community. Following that, Monique from the Air District is going to give high-level feedback summary from the one-on-one calls they've been having with you all. And lastly, we're going to have a discussion on any preparation items for the next meeting, which will be in person in Barrio Logan. Next slide. And here's the order of the agenda today. So after a roll call and some general updates, we'll ask for approval of our last meeting's notes, as well as tonight's agenda. Following that, we'll have a discussion on the charter and voting protocol. And then the Air District will have its update on air quality monitoring. And then Monique will provide their presentation on the member feedback. Next slide, please. And then we'll close out the meeting with just some quick prep items for the in-person meeting on February. Following that, we'll open it up for any general public comments and closing remarks. And just want to give folks a heads up that I'll be unfortunately, I have to leave a little early, but Anna, you're in good hands with Anna, who'll be taking over once I leave after the charter presentation. And then this is just a quick reminder of our meeting agreements. We ask folks to create a space where everyone feels comfortable contributing to the discussion. We encourage folks to step up if they haven't provided any comment, and step back if you find yourself talking more than others. We ask folks for one person to speak at a time, to listen to each other and respect each other's opinions, knowledge, and perspectives. And we'll do our best to be conscious of time and get folks out by 7 p.m. so folks can spend time with their family and have dinner. And lastly, we'll ask folks to please speak slowly and clearly so our interpretation team can do their job and interpret in an efficient manner. Next slide. So now we'll do a quick roll call. So Anna will be bringing up a new tracking sheet that we'll be using to demonstrate attendance and as well as show quorum in a more efficient manner. To get us started, is Keith Corey here from the city of San Diego?
Yes, Keith Corey here.
Thank you. Jack Monger?
Jack is not here this evening, but this is Massey Hatch. I'm here. Hi.
Thanks, Massey. Sarah Giobi?
Yes, I'm present. Good evening.
Good evening. Lydia? Not seeing Lydia. Sandy, Commissioner Naranjo?
Present.
Thank you. Is Phil Gibbons here?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Phil. Tim Garrett from Sandag?
Here.
Thank you, Tim. Joy Williams?
Good evening. I'm here.
Good evening. Nick? Paul?
Hi there. Yep, I'm here.
Hi, Nick. Martin Reeder, City Nashville City.
Present. Good evening.
Thank you. Román Partida López.
Buenas tardes, I'm here.
Buenas tardes. Dr. Stephanie Yoon.
I'm here.
Thank you. Diane Vermeulen. Thought I saw you. Not seeing Diane. Samantha Liu.
Good evening, present.
Thank you, Samantha. Is Helen Haas here as well? Not seeing Helen. Dinah Willer.
I'm here.
Thank you. Filomena Marino.
Present. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Janice Luna Reynoso.
Present.
Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
John Alvarado. Not seeing John. Hillary Medina. Not seeing Hillary. Alicia Sanchez.
Presente.
Alicia. Margarita Moreno.
Presente. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes. Naomi Sanchez. Not seeing Naomi. Salvador, are you here? I'm sorry, I just skipped Vanessa. Vanessa, are you here?
I'm here.
Thank you. Not seeing Salvador. Montserrat?
Presente.
Hola, Montserrat. Sylvia Calzada?
Good evening to all. Presente.
Sylvia. Ashley Valentin Gonzalez?
Present.
Ashley. Is Josephine Talamantes here? I'm seeing Josephine. Maritza Garcia.
Present.
Thank you, Maritza. And with that, we have quorum. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, this is Lydia Payaser. Sorry, I'm joining late from BA
Oh, no
Systems.
worries. Thank you, Lydia.
Thanks, Julie.
Great. And now I'll hand it over to Kathy Keehan at the Air District to give us a quick update.
Quick update. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be with you tonight to be sharing that we have opened 2 incentive programs. We've opened to applications. The first one is our General Moyer AB 617 Farmer GMER heavy duty equipment program. That's our traditional program where you can trade in an older diesel piece of equipment for a newer, cleaner machine. That application period is open. It opened yesterday, and we'll be taking the first round of applications through February 24th. We will still be accepting applications after February 24th, but if you want to be considered in the first round and not be on a backup list, hopefully, we encourage people to apply early for that. I'm going to put a phone number and an email in the chat for those folks who have questions about that program and want more information how to apply. The second program that we opened yesterday as well is one we're really, really excited about, focused specifically on Portside. It's our zero emission truck pilot program. And for those of you who have attended these meetings before, you remember us talking a little bit about this, where it's an opportunity for businesses who do at least 52 trips a year in and around Portside to qualify for up to $250,000 a truck, or up to 90% of that purchase cost of those zero emission trucks. You don't have to scrap the old truck, at least in this initial phase of the program. And again, it's a program for folks who are already operating at least 52 trips a year in Portside. We're really excited about this program. We think it will really motivate people to try out those zero emission trucks. And so that application process has also started. You can find information on our website, and we'll be accepting applications until we run out of money. I'm hoping that's going to be before February 24th, but we'll see what the demand is for those projects. So anyway, I just wanted to let you folks know that those programs are available. We're excited and really hopeful that we'll get a lot of great applications that'll provide really exciting emission reductions for the community. So with that, I'm going to put my information and the information where you can reach out to us if you have questions in the chat for today's meeting. So please feel free to reach out to us. That's all I have for today.
Great. Kathy, could you take at least one question from Roman?
Sure.
And Nick? No, it's
Can't let you get off that easy, Kathy. Yeah, thanks, Kathy, for that update. Just really quick on those 2 programs, or well, more specifically on the Portside pilot program. Is charging infrastructure going to be supported as well, or is it just primarily the vehicle? And if it's not, like, how are businesses then going to try to get that support for charging infrastructure?
That's a really good question, Ramon. Charging is not eligible for the zero emission truck pilot, but it is for our AB 617 Moyer heavy duty program. So you can, if you're a business that you have electric trucks and you want to transition, you can do an application for the pilot program for the trucks and an application in the Clean Air for All program for the infrastructure. There's also some programs available through SDG&E that will help businesses install infrastructure for heavy duty equipment as well. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Great. Nick, do you still have a question?
No, I think Roman got it. I actually, you know what I do? So once we get the proposals from folks, would those proposals then be presented to I guess the steering committee, I guess, to kind of weigh in on, I don't know, if there's preference towards maybe a smaller operation versus maybe bigger operations that might be applying for these same funds? Or is that a decision solely for APCD?
We do bring projects back for feedback to the steering committee. Typically annually, we'll go through, we have to do an evaluation to see if the projects meet the requirements for the state programs. We don't want to bring projects to the steering committee that aren't eligible to be funded anyway. So, but typically we try to bring those projects back. We try to anonymize them a little bit so people don't pick favorites or unfavorites from the businesses that apply. But we would encourage feedback, and just so the community understands what kinds of applications we're seeing and what kind of projects are eligible.
Cool, thank you.
Great, thank you. And thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Dinah, for that update on EV charging infrastructure. Great. Moving along, I'll hand over the mic over to Monique with a few updates.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chewy, and good evening, everyone. So good to see so many of you here today. I have two updates today. The first is in regards to New Leaf biofuel in Body Logan. So APCD is still monitoring the situation at New Leaf biofuel. And just to refresh folks' memory, this facility was creating odors in the community. And the district had obtained a stipulated abatement order against New Leaf, which to date they have complied with. So they've installed equipment to really control and address the odors. And we've seen improvement in the odor situation, but we're still continuing to monitor the situation in order to ensure that the nuisance odors are reduced and eliminated. So I just want to thank APCD staff and then New Leaf Biofuel for working together, but also thank the community for bringing this to our attention so that action can be taken. I do want to emphasize, and Chewy, I'm not sure if you have this on the next slide, but if you are still, if you're in the neighborhood and you're still experiencing odors from that facility, please do let us know. We have on this slide a phone number, an email address, and different ways that you can contact us to let us know if this is an ongoing issue, because we want to make sure that all efforts are being made to reduce those odors, and we can go back and check on the facility and see what's going on. So again, please do give us a call if that's an issue. Also, feel free to use this phone number and email address as well. If there's other issues in the community as it relates to air quality, please let us know, and we'll send out compliance to check on those issues as well. So that's the first update there. And then I want to transition to the second update, and then I could maybe take some questions too after both updates. The second update I wanted to give briefly is in regards to MCC's project or proposed project. We had a meeting, or MCC had a meeting last week on the 18th at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church Parish Hall. And this meeting was facilitated by their PR consultants, Falcone Consulting. And there were a number of people that were at that meeting. It took place early in the morning, around 9 a.m. But I do see several people that are here today that were also part of that discussion. I see John, I see Nick, also I think Maritza was there as well. and a few other people as well. So there was a good turnout from the steering committee present at that conversation as well. One of the things that from the air pollution control districts really interest in wanting to learn more about the proposal was to better understand what MCC's zero emission vehicle plan was going to be and get more clarity around that. In December, the APCD board submitted a letter to the port really asking for more clarity on that issue. I think at that meeting in last week, we got a little bit more clarity on that. From MCC's own presentation, they stated that zero emission truck use targets are consistent with MCAS to a goal of 40% by June 2026 and 100% by 2023. But the big caveat of that was they had three really big off-ramps to not have to be in compliance with those goals. And one was the inability of trucks to meet customer operation standards, which is really general. The second is unavailability of necessary charging infrastructure. And number three, are not yet acquired by tenant customers who are otherwise in compliance and applicable CARB regulations governing zero emission truck fleets, which is essentially small business and solo or small fleet transporters. So with these really big three kind of off ramps, Domingo made the point at the meeting because this was a statement that they were making at the meeting, and I believe that they made at the last time we had a CSC meeting was that they are in compliance with the CERP, but Domingo made it very clear that actually, because of these off ramps, they're actually their proposal wouldn't be in compliance with the CERP, and shared that pretty clearly. And MCC understood that and decided to rethink and revise how they're kind of talking about their project in relationship to the CERP. So far, I haven't received any other updates about the project, but I don't know if there's anyone here from the port that has any other project updates that potentially share at this moment.
Thank you, Monique. I'm going to pass it to Phil Gibbons, our staff, to provide the update.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monique, for that summary of the meeting last week. I wasn't in attendance at the meeting, so I didn't get to hear all the discussion that occurred. But as of right now, I don't have any updates directly from Mitsubishi and when they may go to our board. So as far as I understand it, they're still taking in consideration all of the feedback that the community has provided, our direction from our board, which has been clear that they need to have a zero emission vehicle plan in their project. And so, in the future, if that date is scheduled to go to the board, I'll certainly let you all know about that.
Thank you so much, Philip. Let's go to Montserrat. I know that I actually remember you were at the meeting as well. Go ahead.
Sí, claro. Solamente quería mencionar esto, ¿verdad? Que hubo representación de este comité en esta junta con MCC y eso es muy bueno, ¿no? Porque no nada más es planearlo, sino estar ahí, ¿no? En este tipo de reuniones donde sabemos, ¿no? Que si vamos a tener un aumento en las emisiones o va a haber un aumento de camiones cerca de nuestras comunidades, estemos ahí presentes, ¿verdad? Para dar nuestra opinión y para, recordar, ¿no? Todo el trabajo que hemos estado haciendo en este comité. Gracias.
Thank you, Montserrat. I see John's hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was at the meeting and quite honestly, I thought there was a lot of good points made. But, one of the things that I would really like us to focus in on, I mean, the bottom line is Mitsubishi is going to have to comply, and it's really straightforward. I mean, everything is kind of there in black and white, and they either have to comply or they don't. It's real simple. But my whole issue is right now, what do we do for the people in the community who are suffering from what we currently have in terms of the pollution. And it just seems to me that because this is a strategic port, that both the feds and the state, okay, should have some responsibility in helping us get equipment that would, in fact, eliminate the pollution from the home. Now, granted, the air filter systems that we have, okay, wonderful, okay, but I've been looking in and doing a lot of research on the these units, these wall units. They provide heat and they provide air, okay, and they completely clean all of the particulate matter from the air before it comes into the home, okay. I understand that some of this equipment could be gotten and you get a tax rebate because of it. And of course, I believe the feds are involved here because this is a strategic port. And of course, they want their shipyards, so on and so forth. And, you know, I run the Good Neighbor Project, and my concern is that, you know, we need to clear the air not in 2025 or not in 2030. We need to clean it tomorrow because these young people, okay, are suffering today. And I really think we need to find out how we can apply some of these techniques that would work. I actually contacted Home Depot because they have people in each one of those places, if you will, in each one of the stores that sell this equipment. The equipment is very inexpensive when you consider how much medical bills and everything else, not to mention death from, you know, some of the issues here. So my whole thing is that I really think that as a community as a whole, okay, we really need to look at things closer, if you will, to the issue, which is our children right now. You know, I'm working with 3,500 kids, 10 different schools, all within our area. Okay. And I think there's some solutions out there that we really need to embrace and get it done. And most of these systems can be retrofitted in all these older homes. You know, I think it's wonderful. And I thank you for listening. And I just hope we can move on to more positive things. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, John. I'm going to actually turn it back over to Chewy if there aren't any other questions about New Leaf Biofuel or about the MCC proposed project. Awesome. And we'll keep you posted on both those things as we learn more. Again, I encourage you all to use that phone number, use that email address. We also have an app as well that I'll put the link in the chat box if you're interested in uploading the app to your phone. When there's an air quality concern, there's odors, there's smoke, there's dust, please do give us a call and we'll send out a crew out there to see what the issue is and respond to it as soon as possible. So thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and actually turn it back over to Chewy.
Thanks, Monique. Thank you, everybody. Next slide, please. Great. So for our second agenda item, we'd like to request a motion and a second from the steering committee to approve the November 15th, 2022 meeting notes and tonight's agenda.
Martin Reeder, National City, so moved.
We have a motion from Martin.
Second, Commissioner Naranjo.
A second, Commissioner Naranjo. Anyone opposed? Hearing none. So the motion is approved. Thank you, everybody. And just for the record, Sal, no worries on being late. Salvador is here as well. Great. Now we'll move on to the next agenda item. So we want to do an annual review of the Portside Charter. And so for today's meeting, I'll go over the history of the charter and walk through a couple of suggestions APCD and the facilitation team might be helpful for future meetings. Next slide, please. So for folks who have been in the Portside CSC since the beginning might remember that there is a draft charter that was created by the Air District back in November 2018. The facilitation team joined the CSC meetings in October of 2019, and our first task was to work with the steering committee and finalize the charter. So in November 2019, we had a discussion, and following that, a charter working group was formed with members of the steering committee, met 3 times, and presented the new charter in April and May of 2020, where it was approved. Since then, there has been one update to the charter, and that was in October of 2020, where we included the community member stipend protocol, as well as the letter, position letter voting protocol. Next slide, please. So I'll do a quick run through of the current organization of our charter, which I had sent to the group last week. So these main sections include a background on the Portside Community Steering Committee. The second section lays out the objectives of the committee. Section 3 goes over membership, and section 4 goes over the meetings. Next slide, please. So for today's discussion, we really wanted to focus on a few things and hear thoughts from the committee. So in the membership section, which goes over the criteria and selection of committee members, there is some language in the terms of appointment that says an appointment to be a committee member is 2 years with the option to extend. Today, we haven't really implemented the extension process. Everybody who's joined the committee has stayed on until they decide to leave. So we'd like to perhaps include some clarity on what that extension protocol looks like, or the appointment length in total. Next slide. Thank you. And then for the meeting section, sections A through D just go through logistics, attendance, and decorum. He clarifies what a quorum is, which is a simple majority of voting members. There's also language that states that these meetings are not bound by Brown Act requirements, since this is an advisory committee in nature. And then section F goes through voting protocols. Next slide, please. So we have a couple of sections we'd like some feedback from steering committee members. The first one being adding, currently there is no language on substitute motions and how that voting protocol would be carried out. So we think it'd be great to have that clarity in writing. And lastly, there is language on no email voting. And as you note, as we noticed in the last meeting, where there was a sensitive voting item, it was moved to an email vote since it was a sensitive item that was coming up to the port board, and there wasn't another meeting between then. So we think adding some flexibility for time-sensitive items might make sense, given how we only meet monthly. Next slide, please. And lastly, the section on meetings, section G, H, and I, J, talk about the letter voting protocol. We just have one minor suggestion on this section, which would be changing letters of support to position letters, since not every letter is a support letter. And we want to acknowledge that as well. Next slide. So now I'd love to open it up to the steering committee and hear any general reactions to the suggestions we have and what questions you might have on the charter itself. And please feel free to raise your hand or add comments in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. Joy?
Yeah, thank you for that really concise summary. That was very useful. I think I wanted to say I support the need for more clarity on how we're ordering the voting on motions when there's more than one. I think that was one thing that added to the confusion at last month's meeting is, we didn't actually take the motions in order, but we were trying to do both of them at the same time. So I would support some clarifying language there. So thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Any other comments? Sarah?
Yeah, I actually raised this last month, and since it's part of the charter, they set expectations about meeting attendance here, but I don't see that we actually have a process for reviewing that. And it seems to me that it's been a little bit disruptive to have folks that disappear for months at a time and then show up, and then they're missing some of the background information. And so from a continuity perspective, I think if this is important and people want to participate, then we should be looking at that attendance and then making way for other folks if there are other folks that necessarily would be more interested in coming and participating on a regular basis. I also support, I think that we need some clarity on the voting, and I support Joy's comment there. I did want to ask, when I looked at the comment that was, or the document that was referenced for stipends, it appears to be a document that is watermarked privileged deliberative draft. And so I'm trying to understand, is that actually CARB's final guidance on this? And is it our intention to follow their guidance?
Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, I'll double. Oh wait,
I was going to say that the reason I wanted to bring it up is that I know it was made pretty clear that people shouldn't be receiving stipends if they are receiving compensation otherwise to attend the meetings, but that's definitely not in our procedures, nor is the question asked on the application form. So I think from a transparency perspective, we intend to enforce that at some point we have to ask that question. So those would be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Great comments. Janice?
Greetings, thank you. I do agree that continuity is important, consistency of support, but also being trauma informed and understanding that in our communities, we do get sicker more than other communities, or our children end up hospitalized due to the pollutant factors. So I want to take that into consideration. Even myself as a nonprofit director, having to put out fires or figurative fires in our community with emergencies and things that we're dealing with, we're not always able to be consistent. But I do think that with this said, that we should have a plan, planning for that, a contingency plan where we have an alternate. Just keeping that in mind and being trauma informed, and why we're having these meetings, that we're actually impacted. A lot of us here are impacted more than other folks. We might not have the flexibility. We might have to be at our 2 or 3 jobs sometimes just to make ends meet, and we don't want to be we don't want to exclude anybody from this opportunity if they really care. I think having the conversation to see if they want to continue to participate, if there's continued absences, but also checking in and see if they're well, if they're okay, or if they need support, and having that contingency plan to bring in an alternate or someone to support their voice and who they're representing. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. And yes, everyone has the ability to assign themselves an alternate. It's something we haven't really seen an alternate for any of the community residents. So I definitely encourage you all to ask someone in your network to be an alternate, since it's mostly agencies who have their alternates assigned right now. But yes, I totally agree on, yeah, we can make that more clear and set up a process for that as well. Any other comments or questions? Maritza?
Hi, I don't think anyone really mentioned about the whole emailing voting, but I believe that we should have some kind of flexibility. For example, the last meeting where it was such a time sensitive thing and we weren't going to have any kind of meeting in between. So I definitely support that option as well.
Thanks, Maritza. Great. Any other comments for us to consider? Great. I guess my next question is one question. Well, yeah, my next question is for next steps. How would you all like to see the charter update process go? So I'm thinking 2 pathways right now. We could either start a charter working group, again, like it was first done, where they meet independently and provide those recommendations to us. Or we can, the facilitation team in Air District can draft up a proposed updates to the charter and present it at the next meeting for discussion, and vote if you all feel comfortable with the draft as it is, or updates to consider for the March meeting to vote on. Any thoughts? Folks are a little quieter today. Roman?
Yeah, thanks, Chewy, for presenting those options. You know, as part of the initial working group that did some of the updates, and you know, it took us some time because we also had some difficulty finding time that worked for all of us, right? So I think maybe at this point it might make sense for you all to draft up the changes and then bring it back to us, especially since we're going to be meeting in person next month. I think it'd be a like really fruitful discussion since we'll all be there. And then based on like what happens next week, sorry, my daughter's here with her microphone. I'm sorry, what happens in the next meeting, you know, we either adopted it, and if we don't, then that might require, I think, or might trigger then like a working group, right, to go further into finalizing it. So I think for now, I would recommend that you all, the facilitators, do that.
Great, thank you, Roma, and I'm seeing other folks agree. Sandy, Maritza, Stephanie all agree. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. We'll draft some changes and present it to you all for our next meeting, which is in person, which is exciting, and decide next steps from there. Thank you all. Next slide. So now we'll hand it over to the Air District team, who will be providing an update on their air quality monitoring efforts.
Thanks, Chewy. I assume that's my cue. Do you need me to share the presentation on my end, or is that going to be the facilitators?
No, we have it on our end.
Okay. This might be someone else's part because this isn't my slide. Oh, there it is. Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Bradley. I am the senior chemist for the community monitoring program. My group's job is to basically collect ambient air data and sort of review the data for quality and then present it to the community, as well as sort of verify that SERP goals are essentially evaluating the SERP goals to make sure we're heading in the right direction. So I did want to mention, we might have talked about this briefly in the past, that we have a ambient air metals program that we're rolling out. We actually finalized our contract with a third-party lab that's going to perform the analysis so that we can have a much larger throughput of sampling. So our sampling equipment has been deployed to a few sites across Portside communities, including Sherman Elementary School, where we've actually historically sampled for metals, as well as at Chicano Park and Caltrans Boston Avenue site, which is kind of a freeway entrance site. And I have a map in a few slides, so I can kind of point out where these are on a map. Yeah, metals are very important to monitor as well. They're known to lead to cancer and other health problems, including reproductive and developmental issues. So we definitely want to include those in our monitoring efforts. And I believe probably late spring, early summer is when we will have a data report, a presentation during a steering committee meeting. So stay tuned for that. The next slide, please. So rather than metals, though, today we're going to be talking about diesel particulate matter. This slide might look a little familiar. We've had this slide up in the past, and I just kind of wanted to refresh everybody's memory as to why we care about diesel particulate matter. So diesel exhaust contains a lot of toxic chemicals. The particulate matter contained in that exhaust is linked to cancer over long-term exposures. And then short-term exposures are related to kind of the usual suspects: irritation of eyes, nose, and throat, lungs, leading to headaches and coughs, and sensitivity to allergens, things like that. So if you want more information specifically on the health effects of diesel particulate matter, we have a URL at the bottom of the slide there, as well as a QR code if you want to scan that, and you can get a little bit more information from the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, I believe is the acronym there, OEHA. But yeah, you can see here on the slide this picture of diesel particulate matter right in the middle. They're very small particles that can get deep into lung tissue and cause a lot of problems. So very important target for our monitoring group. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is a map of our current monitoring sites that are active in the Portside community. There's a caption at the bottom to kind of spell out what the acronyms are, but we have our marine terminal furthest west right there on the water. 10th Ave, we have Sherman Elementary School at the top, right in the middle, Chicano Park. It's kind of the Logan Ave and Cesar Chavez Parkway intersection there. Caltrans Boston is right on a freeway entrance on-ramp. It's if you ever use that on-ramp, you can probably see a chain link enclosure as you're merging onto the freeway, and that's our equipment. And then Ocean View Boulevard is furthest east. It's our most inland Portside site. So just to kind of give everybody a feel for where our equipment is being deployed to. And if we go to the next slide, these are a couple of future sites. We're working on the permits and lease agreements and stuff. And these are a little further south towards National City. So we will be deploying equipment there just as soon as we get our permits and our construction done and all that kind of stuff. So that's where we're headed with that. But as I mentioned on the previous slide, it was Chicano Park, Caltrans Boston, and Sherman Elementary, where we're doing metals monitoring. And then all of those have black carbon monitors, and black carbon data is what we're going to be mainly focused on today. Black carbon is one of our metrics or our ways of sort of quantifying diesel particulate matter and getting a feel for how much of it is in the air. So if we go to the next slide. So here we can get started on the data. And I'll slow down as we get to the more quantitative stuff here. So just to kind of orient everybody on what's going on this graph, on the left side, on the vertical axis there, you have black carbon concentration. And this is specifically at the Sherman Elementary School site. Just to keep this graph simple, it would be very crowded and busy if we had all of our sites on here. So concentration is really just a way of measuring the number of particles that are in an air, like a piece of air or a parcel of air. So a higher concentration means there's more diesel particulate matter, more black carbon. Lower concentration means there's less. And along the horizontal axis, you can see the date. So January 2020 all the way up through July 2022. And there's this consistent pattern that you see the concentration go higher in the wintertime and then back lower in the warmer months, higher in the colder months, lower in the warmer months. And the general reason for that has to do with the weather. In general, and the scientific principle is that when something's colder, it contracts. When it's warmer, it expands. And that's what we're seeing here is the air in the wintertime, in the colder months, contracts. There's less mixing. There's less ability for the air to expand. And so all the diesel particulate matter that's emitted into the air is captured in a much smaller air parcel. And so we see higher concentrations in the wintertime. Whereas in the summer, the air is warmer, it expands, there's more chance for mixing. And so we see lower concentrations in the summertime. Now, with this graph in particular, we kind of wanted to look at what's happening year by year. And you can see in January 2020, concentration, the maximum there in January is 2.3-ish. And you get to January 2021 and you see much higher concentrations. And then January 2022, you see the concentrations dip back down. And obviously the trend we want to see is lower concentrations and lower concentrations. So as far as speculating why certain times show higher concentrations and other times show lower concentrations, and we can speculate on that. But one analysis that we'd like to perform in the near future, and this will be a sort of collaboration, is if we could get data on the amount of traffic or the amount of cargo coming through the port, any way we can get a sense of the number of trucks, the amount of truck traffic and diesel engine traffic coming through the port, and sort of cross-reference that with our black carbon data historically, we think that could be a really useful way of sort of tying in traffic specifically to the concentrations we're looking at. But, you know, we have this January 2022 data that looks a lot lower than January 2021, and that's the trend we want to see. That's the trend we want to sustain. And so we'll continue sort of comparing and evaluating our SERP goals, our community emission reduction plan goals, to see if the strategies we're putting into place are resulting in the emissions reductions that we're hoping for, as my group continues to monitor this type of pollution. Obviously, we're in January 2023 right now. We're collecting data as we speak. So we hope to have, you know, more info in the near future as far as, you know, if this trend continues, or if, you know, if there's other strategies that need to be employed to continue that downward trend of black carbon concentration. Make sure I didn't have anything else to touch in on the slide. I'm going to circle back to the slide in a few minutes. I see a hand up. I can definitely pause and take questions if anything needs clarification.
Thanks, Kevin. This was very interesting data. And I just had a quick question that's a point of curiosity, not something I'm concerned about. But in January 2021, it looks like not only are the highs higher, but the lows are lower. Do you have any comments on why that would be?
That is a good question. Now that you say that, I'm curious about it too. I don't actually know. I could speculate, but again, it's like I mentioned, I'd like to kind of dig into the traffic data if it's available at all, and sort of try to get a feel for what days are associated with higher concentrations, what days are associated with lower concentrations, and what kind of common factors we can see between those types of days. But unfortunately, I don't know why you would see a lower low and a higher high along that. But that is a good question. I'm also curious about that now that you raised that. Okay, can we actually go to the next slide, please? Okay, so this graph gives some similar information. It's a little different in that instead of going year by year, this is sort of averaged over the time of day. So again, on the vertical axis, you have concentration, although this concentration is averaged over an hour. So you have, like, for instance, at the 1 a.m. data point, it's all the data for the entirety of that site averaged from midnight to 1 a.m. And then the 2 a.m. averaged from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., et cetera. And really what we're trying to get at here is, what does the concentration look like on average at a given time of day? So we have Sherman Elementary in dark blue, the Marine Terminals station in black, the Ocean View Boulevard station in red, and the Chicano Park station in light blue. And of course, along the horizontal axis, you go from 12 a.m., so midnight, to 3 a.m., 6 a.m., 9 a.m., all the way throughout the day. And so this time of day analysis is really interesting, and it kind of follows through what we would have expected to see, but just to kind of walk everybody through. So let's say you wake up at 6 a.m. and you see the concentration at that moment is starting to rise, starting to go up and rise to its peak. The reason for that is due to two different effects. One being the emissions. It's rush hour. There's a lot of traffic on the road. So that's obviously going to release the diesel particulate matter, and our black carbon monitors are going to start detecting that. But also, it's still kind of cold in the morning. The day hasn't heated up yet. And so that combination leads to the highest peak that we're going to see throughout the day, particularly at Marine Terminal. As the day goes on, it warms up. So warming, as I mentioned on the previous slide, means the air expands, there's more mixing. So we see the concentration start to dip in the late morning, early afternoon. And that trend really holds through the afternoon. I do want to mention, and I'm going to circle back to this in a minute, the other factor that is in play here is the sea breeze, or the westerly wind coming in off the ocean. It's typically cleaner air coming in off the ocean. And that tends to happen later in the morning as the land heats up and the ocean is still cool. That cool air starts rushing into the land. So that's another factor. And again, I'll talk more about that on the next slide, specifically about wind. So anyway, back to our sort of walkthrough of the day. Getting to the afternoon, later in the afternoon, we know rush hour picks up again, but we don't see the concentration start to tick back up until a little bit later in the evening when the weather cools again. So again, those two factors together are what's causing those concentrations to really spike. And so through the evening into the nighttime, you see it reach another peak. And then we see this overnight dip. And even though it's cold overnight and cold weather is associated with higher concentrations, there's just not enough traffic to sustain those high concentrations through the nighttime. So we see the concentration dip back down, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and then 4 or 5 a.m. Rush hour starts again. See the concentration start to rise again. So that's kind of the general trend that we see on average with black carbon and diesel particulate matter. Sorry if I'm using those two interchangeably. Let me know if that's confusing. I will have time at the end for questions as well. But I just wanted to kind of mention, obviously we're collecting this data so that we can evaluate emissions reduction strategies. And that's kind of the big overarching goal of the community air protection program is getting emissions to be reduced so that community members are not exposed to this harmful pollution. But on top of that, the more that we know about the data, the more we can dig into it, we can hopefully give community members some strategies or at least some information to plan out their daily life. So, for example, if it's, late afternoon, early evening, you're starting to cook dinner and you have a gas stove in your house. Well, gas stoves tend to make the indoor air quality worse in your house. So one strategy might be opening a window because, the outdoor concentration in the early afternoon is typically not so bad until it gets later in the evening. Ventilation can be really, really great for improving air quality in your house. I do see a question popping in the chat. Does black carbon cover both PM 2.5 and PM 10? The short answer is that diesel, so black carbon is really just a metric to measure diesel particulate matter. Diesel particulate matter is a subset of particulate matter more broadly. I would have to check with our chemists what our size cutoff is for carbon. But I don't want to say the wrong answer here, but I know that there's a size cutoff for our particulate matter measure. And sorry, I'm getting the translation in my audio here, but so diesel particulate matter is a subset of particulate matter, and the size. Actually, can we go back to the slide with the picture? It's the second slide. So the most harmful diesel particulate matter is the really, really small particles. These are, less than even 0.2, 0.1 micrometers. PM 2.5 is any particulate matter that's 2.5 micrometers or less. You can see these are very, very small. And the smaller you get with particulate matter, the more dangerous it is because it can really penetrate more deeply into your lungs and your lung tissue and cause all sorts of problems that way. So I hope that kind of gave at least a brief answer to that. And I can definitely get you more detailed info on what the sort of breakdown of diesel particulate matter sizes are in the near future. We can connect via email if that works. I see two more hands up, so let's go ahead and get those questions. John, I think you were first, so you can go ahead.
Many of our community members, this is a little over their head, okay, the information. I really appreciate it though, but let me tell you, I have a sleep PAP machine, okay? And I'm supposed to change out the filters about every 20 to 30 days. And after about 7 to 9 days, my filters are black, okay? And I would love for you guys to be able to actually take those and see what's in it, because that's right here. You know, I'm 2215 Logan Avenue. Okay. So it would give us an exact detail as to what is coming in the window or the door or wherever it might be into while I'm sleeping. And I mean, these filters, I mean, quite honestly, they're pretty disturbing. And when you consider I also have one of those air filters, it's even more stressful, if you will. So it'd be nice to be able to take those samples, see what's in it, and then let the community know what it is that we're really facing. Because some of this is, like I said, way over their head.
Sure.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. To your point about the filter, a lot of our analysis is filter based, where we will collect ambient air samples on a filter and send that to our lab for analysis. I don't know what the limitations are between, you know, what your filter is made out of, whether it's applicable to be used in that kind of analysis, but I'll look into that, and I will reach back out to you, John, and see if that's a possibility, if we can analyze that.
Sure. Whoever or whatever you need in terms to get a hold of me, please do. I'd love for you to get in contact with me.
Great. Thank you. Keith, go ahead.
Yeah, I have more of a general question, not so much about the science behind all of this, but we here in the city of San Diego are approached from time to time with requests to do put air monitoring equipment and sensors on our lighting standards in the right of way. And I know that CARB has been working in concert with ABCD on some of those requests. The most recent one has come from CARB for the other steering committee for the International Border Community. But my general question is ABCD working closely with CARB when those requests come through to various cities to make sure that there's no duplication there, so that when a request comes through to start a study like this one, that it's coming from both of you, and that you guys are realizing potential co-location opportunities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. We do have biweekly meetings with CARB, both with our Portside efforts and our international border efforts, that we're making sure we're on the same page in terms of deploying resources efficiently, performing whatever analyses we can with if CARB has some instrument that we don't have, maybe they can deploy that to a location that's been requested. And then if we have something else, we can deploy it to wherever. So it is a very collaborative effort. And I'll kind of point back to the Community Air Monitoring Plan, or the CAMP. That is a document that we prepare at APCD that kind of outlines our monitoring efforts. And then we send that both to the community and to CARB so that they can review. And again, it's just another way of making sure that we're documenting what all of our plans are, and that we're all on the same page, and something to reference back to make sure that to your point, that we're taking advantage of all the opportunities, not performing any sort of inefficient monitoring where we could deploy resources elsewhere, et cetera. Sarah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sorry, was that it? Keith, I didn't want to interrupt you there.
No, that was it. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Actually, I think you did a pretty good job of making it into plain English explanation. It is really technical, and I appreciate that. So thank you for that. I wanted to notice, I noticed the Boston station isn't on here, and I know that that's a relatively new station, but I've worked in Barrio Logan for coming up on 20 years now. And I do want to point out, because it sounds like you're interested in outlier data. There's probably a condition down there right now that is creating a little bit of an unusual situation, which is there's a major construction project on Harbor Drive for Bayshore Bikeway, which obviously is needed and it's important. But that is actually creating a situation where the trucks can't travel on Harbor Drive right there because they can't physically go around the corner. It's also, the traffic control has been insane, which means the traffic now in the morning is queuing all the way out onto Highway 5 and sitting out there just because of you've got a major throughway that's been put down to one lane. So you may want to just consider that. I don't know how long this situation is going to be, but you may end up finding that you're going to have some outlier data at that station at least starting in January of this year, potentially. I actually have no idea how much longer that construction is going on, but it really has created some strange disruption to the traffic patterns. So
Definitely.
that's all.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I mean, any kind of construction or unusual activity is certainly important for us to consider as we're analyzing not just what the data is saying, but also if our strategies are working or not, because these extenuating circumstances may, positively or negatively bias our data that, maybe we think, oh no, our strategies are not working at all, but really there's just a construction project that's sending trucks much closer to our monitor, for example. So
and I think it's also helpful to have some comparative data from some other areas, like if the Boston Avenue is just right on a freeway on ramp, more or less. So it'd be informational to see how that stacks up with freeway adjacent monitoring in other locations. So
definitely. Oh, and as far as why Boston's not on this particular graph, we only deployed to that site, I want to say August or September, so we don't have a full year of data. And as I kind of showed in that one graph, the data can really change depending on the season. So we don't like to have like an hourly average across our data until we have a full year. So we have that full kind of spectrum of weather, and even more than 1 year is probably best. So
no, actually, we knew that. We knew that it was a newer station, and I think, kind of to Keith's point, there was some earlier discussion that walked the committee through how are these stations selected, and like the need for power and security and all that other stuff. So that was it was. I think it was pretty well understood by the committee that was a new monitoring location.
Okay, good. Yeah. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. We're going through all that with our international border region right now, figuring out where sites are going to be. So always an ongoing thing. And I definitely don't remember where I am now, and that's totally fine. We're here to, address community concerns and questions. But I think if we go to the next slide, and I won't spend too much time on this. I know this can look very intimidating as a graphic, but basically, this is our wind data and our black carbon data combined in a sense. So just to orient everybody on what's going on in this graphic, first of all, the colors that you're seeing, so purple and blue are very low concentration, green and yellow are higher concentration, and orange and red, or excuse me, green and yellow are intermediate, and then orange and red are high concentration. To be clear, Grant Hill, for example, that doesn't mean that Grant Hill has very high concentration. This isn't like a spatial graph like that. Rather, right in the middle there, that blue dot is representing Sherman Elementary School, and then whatever direction you go from there. So if you go to the right on this graphic, that's going east. And what that's saying is that any data in that range is related to wind when it's blowing from the east, when the prevailing wind is from the east. So the key takeaways here, and again, I don't want to get too overly technical, but what this data is telling us is that when the wind is blowing light to moderate from the east is when we see the highest concentration. Whereas if the wind's blowing from the west, really at all, I mean, if it's very low concentration, or very low wind speed, we still see some black carbon spike. But we were expecting, westerly winds to lead to cleaner, lower concentration, both based on the previous graph where time of day, the wind comes in from the west later in the morning and we see that dip. This graphic is backing up that analysis. And it's always important to kind of look at data from different perspectives and analyze it in different ways. And so it's good to kind of back up our assumptions that, hey, if the wind's coming from the west, we would think there'd be lower concentration. Well, this graph says that, and the previous graph says that in a different way. So that's always good to keep track of. I'm happy to spend more time on this if people have questions on it, but in the interest of time, I think we should probably go to the next slide. I remember someone previously in the meeting tonight talked about indoor air purifiers, and I just wanted to kind of highlight that. Obviously my group's responsible for measuring outdoor air quality. Indoor air quality is also very important. Obviously, in your home is where you spend the most time, and so you want to have the best possible air quality there. So Environmental Health Coalition, along with other partners, have this PAIR program, which is trying to get indoor air purifiers to Portside residents. So I definitely encourage everybody to go to that URL or scan that QR code. And I'll have that URL again on the last slide as we're kind of going through questions, and then I can post it in the chat at the end as well. Next slide, please. So just to kind of wrap up here, this is a slide that was presented by the folks at CARB last year sometime. And it's really just highlighting where the diesel particulate matter cancer risk is coming from in terms of sectors. So all the way to the right, you have this pie chart. It's kind of breaking down where the emissions and cancer risk is coming from. And obviously traffic is that huge 40% wedge there. And so, and the other biggest wedge there, CHC, commercial harbor crafts, 19% of the estimated cancer risk. And the maps on the left sort of show, along I-5 on the left, the major traffic links, and then the commercial harbor crafts. Those are kind of associated with the highest cancer risk in terms of the DPM emissions. And if we go to the next slide, and this is going to be a repeat of the previous slide, but I mentioned that we want to see this trend continue over time. And so obviously if traffic is one of the biggest factors that leads to diesel particulate matter exposure, then electrification of trucks, zero emission vehicles, that's one particular strategy that we're going to employ over time that we expect will lower this concentration. And so it's my group's job to continue monitoring this type of pollution to ensure that the strategies that we're putting in place, such as electrification, are leading to the decreases in exposure and pollution that we're hoping that they do. So again, January 23 is right now, and of course, over the next several years, we're going to continue monitoring at these sites to continue to get a feel for, over time, are our strategies reducing air pollution, reducing exposure, et cetera. So if we go to the next slide, and this is my last slide here, I just want to talk a little bit about what our next steps are. So I mentioned sort of cross-referencing our black carbon data with if there's any sort of metric to measure shipping or traffic or anything like that, so that we can get a more specific sense for, hey, high traffic day, we're seeing this level of air pollution, we're seeing this level of black carbon. We also, like I just mentioned, want to continue monitoring and evaluating the goals and strategies in the SERP. And then elemental carbon, again, without getting overly technical here, elemental carbon and black carbon are, the short version is two different ways of measuring diesel particulate matter. So in theory, they should show the same kinds of trends. And so as we get our diesel particulate matter, our elemental carbon data reports, we want to make sure that we have consistency between the trends that we're seeing with black carbon and elemental carbon. And elemental carbon has a couple other advantages. It can kind of differentiate between sources a little bit better, whether it's a diesel engine specifically, or if it's something like a wildfire. So those are other kind of analyses that we can dig into. So I will stop there and open up for other questions, recommendations, etc. I will point to those links that I mentioned are there at the bottom, and my email address is at the bottom too. If you wanted to have a longer conversation, please feel free to reach out via email. So yeah, any questions from anybody? Philip, I see you raise your hand.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. That was a really good presentation. And yeah, it is a hard subject to understand, but I'm not an expert and I think I can understand some of it. So thanks. I just wanted to say that, at the port, we're happy to provide you any data that you may need to do the correlation analysis that you want to do. So I can work with you to give you anything on that. I did, as you were talking, because it was curious, with 2021 being the highest year, I did look at our cargo volumes, and actually of those 3 years, 21 was actually less than 2020 and 2022, I think. So we'll have to, you never know. So, I think looking at the traffic data along the freeways is also a good idea too. So if there's any data sources that measures the traffic density or whatever it is along our major corridors, I think would be helpful. I think it's also helpful. It sounds like you don't have any monitoring stations up in the border community yet, but
we actually have one in San Ysidro.
Okay.
That one's, I think that's been measuring since 2020. I'd have to double check what the start date was. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that kind of comparative information would just be interesting, I think,
Definitely.
to at least me and maybe to the rest of the committee to see what the measurements are there compared to what we're seeing in the Portside community. So yeah, I'm happy to work directly with you if you need any information from me, I can provide that to you.
Great, thank you, Phil. Appreciate it. Keith.
On that topic, just following up from what I said before, in response to the port's question about locations, related to the program I just told you about, there's a 1-year San Ysidro pilot that Carbon and you all are partnering on. There's another 8 locations being requested for monitoring, and one of the measures that they're hoping to to capture on this is black carbon. So there's 8 locations that it looks like very soon we'll get additional sensors to get more of that data. So please feel free to reach out to me if you're looking for more information on those locations.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you, Keith. John.
Yeah, I would just honestly would like to, if we can, start a committee that would start looking more closely at what's actually taking place, like at Sherman schools and things like that. There are programs that we can initiate and help get the state of California, the feds, and everybody else involved to do something about this pollution thing. Now, I'm very supportive of the Port of San Diego from the standpoint that they're honestly trying to get some good work done. I appreciate that. Okay. But having said that, I think there's some other things that the CARB and this committee here can do to solve some of the issues right away. And I think we really need to look at that. And like I said, I really want you to go ahead, take a look at these little filters that I've got. And that's what I'm actually breathing in. And it's wonderful that we have some of these air filters and, grandma and grandpa got one, but how about the kids in the next room? So not to mention the fact that all this stuff is laying on all the furniture and everything else. So I would like to see if you guys could actually start a little subcommittee and see if we can't get this up and running and get some real solutions that'll help us today. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Does anybody have any other questions or comments or recommendations, anything like that, that they'd like to share before we move on to our next topic? All right, well, I will hand it, I think Chewy had to leave, so I think I'm handing it back to Anna now. But yeah, thank you everybody for your input, your questions. Really appreciate the input from the community. I mean, that's why we're here to have these conversations. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, great. And thank you, Kevin, for providing this update and this information. So next, I'll be handing it over to Monique, who will be presenting on some preliminary Portside data that she has found from the feedback from the individual check-ins that she has been conducting with CSC members. So Monique, I'll give it over to you.
Thank you so much, Anna. And would you mind removing the presentation? Because I want to see as many little squares as possible. Awesome, because I don't have anything to show on the screen. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to folks who were able to take some time to connect with me one-on-one. I had conversations with a number of folks. Also, I have some more conversations scheduled tomorrow and next week as well. And really the intention of these conversations were really threefold. One is an opportunity, as someone who's new to the Air District, an opportunity for you all to get to know me better, but also an opportunity for me to get to know all of you much better and what your interests are and your connection with the community and all. And then third, really better understand what your experience has been so far as a CSC member. And as we're at the beginning of the year, what are some things that we should really be taking into consideration and really hold as guidance moving forward as we work in partnership in the CSC as well. And so had a number, every conversation was incredibly illuminating, incredibly helpful. And so what I've done is I've started to develop a list of kind of patterns that I've heard and start to make these really actionable for the Air District. And I wanted to share those patterns back with you all. Because I have still a handful of conversations happening tomorrow and next week, I will update this to include those other suggestions as well, and also any suggestions that you all may share this evening as well. So what I'll do first is I'm going to share with you kind of 12 key things that I heard from these one-on-one conversations, and I want this to be as interactive as possible as I'm sharing out. So if I say a point that resonates with you, or maybe something that you shared with me directly, or just something in general that resonates with you, I want you to use your raise hand feature or thumbs up, or you can use an emoji on that point. And so I just kind of want to see, that's why I have all these black squares here. I want to see what, which one of these points kind of really resonates with this group. Again, my intention is this feedback that I received is really to start to integrate that in how we're doing our work together, collectively moving forward as well. So if something resonates with you, raise up your hand, thumbs up emoji, and so that I can see, if I've captured these themes and that really reflect your priorities as well. So with that, I'm gonna start with this first one. I heard from a number of folks that refocusing the CSC meeting space to have a clear purpose and connect the agenda more intentionally with the Community Emission Reduction Program, the CERP, and the MCAS specifically. So folks had shared that before in the past, they felt that there was more clearer purpose collectively for the group when you all were in the development stage of the CERP, but really feel that there's a need to kind of repurpose the conversations in this group and ensure that as presentations come up, that there is a direct connection to both CERP and MCAS implementation. That resonates with you? Let's see a show of hands here. That resonates with you. Awesome. Great. Thanks for sharing. And so one of the ways we want to start to try to do that is when folks come to us and say, hey, we'd like to give a presentation on XYZ, or if committee member says, hey, we'd like to give a presentation on this, one of the things we're going to ask in advance is, okay, how is that connected to the CERP goals? And one of the ways we want to start to institutionalize that in the meeting space as well is before every presentation, we clearly articulate, we clearly state how this is directly related to CERP or MCAS goals and which goals in particular is it related to. So that's one of the ways that we're going to start to try to put this into action. The other thing that we heard as well is really ensuring when we have in-person meetings, and we're going to have one next month, they should be purposeful, an opportunity to build relationships, be engaging and action-oriented, but essentially not be something that could have been done in an online space. People really enjoyed having that round table feel as this committee had pre-pandemic times, and so really bringing that back. That resonates. Show of hands. Few hands, great, awesome. Yeah, and feel free to use your hand here as well, your actual hand as well. We also heard the importance of intentional outreach to support greater community participation, meaning that folks really wanted to see other people in this space, other community folks in this space that maybe had been engaged at one time, but also maybe haven't been engaged in these conversations. So having the Air District, with all your help as well, be very intentional of our community outreach to promote the opportunities for community members to participate in this space. So if that resonates with you, let me see a show of hands. Awesome. Great. We also heard from folks, ensuring that presentations are easy to understand, particularly when it comes to emission inventory. So meaning, what are the different sources of pollution? And what does that basically mean for my health and my community's health at large? So understanding where are the different sources that pollution are coming from, and what does that mean for me personally? So always having conversations that really are better understanding the causes of pollution, but also what that means in terms of our own community health. So really being able to state that when we give presentations. How many of you resonate with that as well? Awesome. And so Kevin was starting to integrate some of that too at the beginning of the presentation, talking about the specific, health impacts of Black carbon as well. So we're already starting to do that in how we're also thinking about how we're developing presentations as well. Another thing that folks mentioned is building intentional relationships, having APCD staff build intentional relationship with community members. And so making ourselves available for in-person meetings and informal settings like outside of the CSC space as well. We'd want to, of course, be mindful of our capacity to do so, but really having the willingness and openness to meet with folks outside of the CSC space and to be able to support you all if there's extra questions, if there's other things that maybe aren't discussed in this space you want to discuss, but having the ability to connect with APCD staff. How many resonate with that one? Awesome. Great. Another one that we heard is having a better social media presence for the community so that there could be more intentional community education to spread the word, not only about engagement opportunities, but to spread information, some of the information that we shared tonight. How do we make it accessible, meaningful in like a social media post so that folks who maybe aren't able to be here tonight can at least start to get some of that information via social media? How many of you resonate with that? Awesome, great. So we'll be working with Melina on our team to start to engage in those conversations. Here's one, is ensuring that emissions data is readily available and downloadable, meaning that it's not necessary, it's not difficult to find on the website, that it's maybe in an Excel sheet so that if like community researchers wanted to do some kind of analysis, they could, if it was like something that could be on an Excel sheet. And so really just making emissions data easier to find and also easier to review and analyze as well. If that resonates with you, put your hand up as well. Cool, awesome. I also heard as well being really mindful about, whoops, are y'all still here? Being mindful about, including folks who are monolingual Spanish speakers into the conversation. How can we be more mindful of that beyond just interpretation, but really providing space and different facilitation techniques to really elevate folks who are monolingual Spanish speakers in this space? That resonates with you? Let me see a show of hands. Great. Absolutely. And so some of these things is, we'll be working with our facilitation team on strategies on how to do that as well. Another one that I heard as well is making sure that information and data are more accessible, relevant, and actionable for community members. So people said, there's a lot of information being shared all the time. The information is and the quality of the data is good, but we just want to understand how we can use that one part of our daily lives. And so Kevin today tried to provide certain strategies in terms of that are immediately actionable, saying, hey, you know what? From 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. is when you have those dips in emissions. So those are opportunities to open your windows, get some fresh air. So we want to start to do that intentionally and integrate some of those suggestions into our presentations and all of that, but also having clear next steps. So clearly stating, here's the next steps we're going to do as APCD, but also providing opportunities for you all to also co-develop next steps. So making information more accessible and actionable. Cool. We're going to do our best to do this, and we're also going to learn and get better at it too, right, throughout the year as well. The other one that I wanted to elevate as well is making sure to provide very clear quarterly monitoring updates and audits on like we did today in terms of what are the emissions, but not only what are the emissions, but what specific goals have been achieved or are in the process of being achieved in the CERT. So kind of providing an audit on a more quarterly basis, saying, look, here's the goals that we've completed so far. These are the goals that are in the process and the status. And here are some other goals that we need to take another look at and start actively working towards as well. So doing the kind of those quarterly audits and with this group as well. Does that resonate with folks? Awesome. And then the last thing I have here is, you know, there are more and more funding streams because of some of the actions the last Congress took that could be available to start to implement elements of the SERP as well, so that we could accomplish those goals collectively. And so one of the ideas that I heard from some folks is, excuse me, developing a subcommittee from folks here that is really tasked with identifying and pursuing funding sources outside of APCD to support SERP implementation. So really having a subcommittee of folks who their task is, right, to really identify what those funding opportunities are, and then actually pursue them as well. Does that resonate with folks as well? Cool. Awesome. I'm seeing a number of hands here. Great. So I want to pause now and have an opportunity for folks in the next few minutes. And I know that we're getting close to time and there's other things to talk about, but just to see if there are other things that folks would like to kind of add to that list that will provide us really like a blueprint or a guide for how we do our work together moving forward in this upcoming year. Are there other things that come to mind for folks? Or maybe we did have a one-on-one and I missed something. Janice.
Hi, yes, highlighting opportunities and solutions. So for the past year, we are promoting the the Branch Out San Diego program to plant more trees in the community. And so there's a lot of power and representation here. And it would really be helpful to not just go over data, but to actually promote things that can help our community. This is coming at no cost to everyone. So it goes a long way to have the support of all of you. We're not just talking about, you know, the disparities, but when we have a solution like thousands of trees available and no one's really taking up that opportunity over a whole year, it's a little discouraging. So I'm hoping that there's follow-up and that we get help in promoting that and getting it out on your networks and people actually taking the opportunity to plant trees and do carbon sequestration at no cost other than, you know, a few gallons of water per month. And understanding and helping, helping educate the community. But really us here, you know, if we all take one of those trees, that would be a big help, especially if we're living Portside. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Janice. And I'm gonna, after my section here, I'm gonna put my email and cell phone in the chat. And so if you have flyers, Janice, or anything like that, please do send it to me, and I can get it sent out to this group. But also it's something that we could, you know, potentially put on our social media as well to promote as well. So thanks for sharing that, Janice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Trying to see if I see some hands here. Phil, did you have your hand up?
I did. Then I
Okay.
took it down and then I put it back up. I didn't know where it went. But thanks, Monique. I just want to thank you too for reaching out and doing this. It's great to have these conversations. It was great to get to know you a little bit better. And I'm glad that you were able to turn it around so quickly and summarize it with the group. And, you know, a lot of the ideas on accessibility of data is stuff that you and I talked about. So it seems like that's something that is core to this group. And, you know, I think we're producing such a wealth of information, you know, and all the stuff that Kevin has shown us and some of the other APCD staff over the past many months have shown us. I mean, there's a lot of great data. And it is complicated, like John said. So if there's a way that we can start to educate, you know, the people outside of this committee, because in some ways we're sort of a silo now, but, you know, it'd be great to publish this information out, to talk about the information that's being collected, talk about the great stuff that we're doing. And then, of course, talking about those, you know, tangible projects that are being implemented from around the region that are geared at lowering emissions over time. I think that's a great idea. So thanks for doing all this work, Monique.
Yeah, thank you so much, Phil. John, I see your hand up. Oh, I think you're on mute.
My family has been in the fishing industry for many, many years, and I was a commercial fisherman for a while and have a pretty good idea where many of the emissions are coming from. I don't think a lot of people understand exactly where these emissions are coming from. It would be nice if they, at maybe one of these meetings you have, in-person meetings with the public, that we show what the emissions are, because everyone right now says it's these damned shipyards, okay, without any clue as to the 10 ships that are just offshore, okay, both from Mexico and from the United States, sitting out there sometimes for weeks, just burning fuel. And in the afternoon, everyone knows that when the wind comes up out of the west, it blows all of that right over Coronado, right over the Bay of San Diego, and right into my back door. But I think we need a better understanding of where all of this, particulate matter and whatnot is really coming from. Okay. And for me, it's a matter of everyone looking at the real facts, not this emotional kill the shipyards, which means kill all the jobs and everything else. I think we need to be very cognizant of the fact that there are many, many issues here involved. And I got to tell you, as a career technical education teacher, retired, to me, it's absolutely essential that people understand the truth about our environment. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, John. And we're very fortunate that we always have really great lines of communications with the California Air Resources Board, and actually some of their staff is here today. And I think that's maybe an action item for us to work closely with CARB staff in terms of, they do the emissions inventory, right? But also, how do we communicate that rich information that's often shown in a pie chart to make it a little bit more accessible and get into the details of what's in the pie, right? What's the recipe in the pie, so to speak? And so that's something that I'd love to follow up with CARB staff, because that was something that we heard a lot in terms of better understanding, what are the sources? There are usually in the emissions inventory, they have different types of sources, but if we can have some examples for each type, localized examples, I think that could contextualize it for folks a little bit better as well. So that's something I see Liliana taking notes right now that we'll be connecting about, just so that how can we make that information more meaningful for folks as well, so that they understand. Cool. Thanks, John. Cool. So if you haven't had a chance to connect with me yet, I'd love to. There's still an opportunity. It's not like, December, January, that was the only time to connect with me. I want to work with you and your schedule. I'm going to put my email address and my cell phone number in the chat if texting is a better way for you all to communicate, or phone calls. And so if you haven't reached out to me yet and we haven't connected one-on-one, please know that my door is open. If we have already connected as well, my door is still open. It's not like we only get to check in once a year, but I really want to operate in a space where we can engage, we can communicate, even if it's not in this meeting space and time as well. So just thank you all for sharing, actually sharing your candid feedback, your honest feedback, because that's just going to make us all collectively better. We're going to do our best to do these things. That's why I wrote them in an actionable way, to integrate these things as we move forward as a group. And really for me, this, is an accountability piece. It's my action plan of how to conduct myself in this space, how APCD to conduct themselves in this space as well. So like I said, once I get to connect with a few more folks, probably the first week of February, I'll send out this kind of high level summary to you all. So you can have a copy of that as well. So thank you all. I'm actually going to turn it back over to Anna, and I'll put my info in the chat box.
All right. Thank you, Monique, for sharing all those insights. And again, thank you again, all the members who have participated in these one-on-one consultations. As Monique mentioned, they will be conducting more one-on-ones, so feel free to reach out to them. And we will also be working with APCD to see how we can incorporate this feedback into the meetings going forward, to ensure that we capture everything that we're hearing. So next, we'll be going over some preparation items. As you may know, our next meeting is scheduled to be in person for this upcoming meeting on February 28th. So we do want to touch base on some items as we start going into the preparation for this meeting. So next slide. So as the facilitation team and APCD look to finalize the meeting logistics for this year, we do want to take the time to first review some of the proposed meeting logistics that have come out from the prior year based on the survey results and some of the discussions we've had in prior meetings, as well as provide some updates on where we stand with some of these items and potential changes that may take place. So the meetings, we had said that we're going to be held in person, potentially with the hybrid option, starting in February 2023, and these will be held once a quarter. The meetings, for the in-person meetings, these are expected to alternate between 2 locations in Barrio Logan and National City. And then the remaining meetings will remain virtual over Zoom, just like today. So with that said, we do kind of want to gauge and see, so we go to the next slide. We do want to see and ask folks here on the members, who is planning to attend these proposed hybrid meetings, whether you plan to attend in person or virtually for the upcoming February 28th meeting. So with that, we'll go ahead and launch a Zoom poll. So if you can go ahead and put your answer on the poll so we can kind of gauge to see where people are planning to. Okay. So far it's looking about 50-50 for virtual and in person. All right, we'll give it a few more seconds. All right. So it looks like 9 have said that they plan to attend virtually. We have 11 responses for in-person and 7 who are still undecided. So if we go to the next slide, one of the reasons we are asking this question is that we're seeing how the team can really prep for the meeting logistics. So I'll be touching on some points and based on what the poll results, seeing how we can move forward. So in terms of location, the location for this upcoming meeting will be in Barrio Logan. The exact address is going to be determined, and we're going to be working with APCD to determine the exact location. So in terms of the goals, and I think touching back based on like what Monique had shared from the one-on-one consultations, we did hear that folks want the in-person meetings to be engaging and interactive. So with this, we kind of set some goals for the in-person meetings and specific to be based on interaction, participation, and building connections. So keeping this in mind, the goal for us is to make the in-person meetings as interactive as possible. And this will allow us to make the meetings worthwhile and allow people to reconnect. However, with this, there are limitations for folks who plan to attend virtually, given the nature of virtual meetings. One caveat to the hybrid meetings is that this may mean that agendas are more focused on facilitating such a space for in-person interactions, and folks joining online may have limited participation. And so with this, we kind of want to hear your thoughts on this and see where the committee stands if this is the case, and kind of pose the question of, and kind of also why we gauged through the Zoom poll, we were also seeing if maybe we can just make the meetings completely in person. But other logistics for hybrid meetings that need to be worked out include interpretation and hybrid technology. And I wanted to check in to see if Monique had any other updates maybe that you could share.
Sorry, I don't at this time, but thank you, Anna.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so based on the Zoom poll. Again, it's kind of 50-50 with virtual and in person. So I think with that, we'll be doing our best to see how we can best facilitate a hybrid meeting where we have that option for in person and a virtual option. And again, the team will be working to just really kind of pinpoint those other technical logistics that we will need. So with that, I kind of want to open it up to the CSC members to see if you have any comments, questions, or concerns as we proceed to the in-person meeting. And again, we're still taking comments. We're still trying to see how to make best it work. So any information or any feedback will be super helpful. So I see John's hand up. John, go ahead.
Just as a suggestion, if you don't have a set building yet, you might want to check with the commander down at the Don Diego post. And they have a space there that I'm sure would be appropriate depending on what day and what time. But that would be a suggestion. And I got to tell you, I really enjoy face-to-face. I think many of our community members, you get a sense of identity when you're face-to-face within 3 feet of an individual. And you can see and have a sense of what they're feeling, not just what they're saying, but what they're feeling. So, anyway, that's my suggestion as far as the location goes.
Great, thank you, John. And we'll definitely take that into consideration, and we'll work with APCD to see if we can make that happen. Sarah?
Yes, thank you. I did want to tell you that I attended a meeting at APCD's offices just before the end of the year, and they use a technology, I think they call it an owl, and it pivots around the camera around the room. So it's a little more engaging if you have some people that are outside the room and some that are inside the room, so that you can follow the speakers on that. And so that might be something to check in with them. And then second, I guess the other comment, I'll repeat what I kind of mentioned last month, which is you do want to check with the folks that do your translation, because there's obviously some unique challenges with having translation both to a Zoom room and to a room full of people at the same time. So you want to make sure that technically it's something they can achieve. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And yes, I know the Air District has been looking into using the OWL technology. So yes, definitely keeping that in mind. And as far as the interpretation, yes, we do recognize that since we'll be having in-person and virtual, we might need 2 sets of interpretation. So we're also seeing how we can make that work best to avoid any confusion. John, I see your hand is up again.
I'm working on a system right now with wide angle cameras that would allow an entire group to be seen and all at the same time. And when they get up and go to let's say to a pedestal to make comments, they would be seen by everyone. And yet the leader of the group would have their own camera. And so they would be able to introduce people and whatnot without having to shift back and forth the system, or in many cases, just a simple laptop. But I'll be coming out with one of those here in the next week or so. I'm not sure we'll be done by the time of the meeting, but would be nice.
Great, thank you for sharing, John. Yeah, and if you can share more information with the facilitation team, we can definitely look into it.
Well, get a hold of me.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments or concerns? Okay. So we will be taking all this back. And again, our team is working with the Air District to really finalize the technology and logistics. But again, we hope to see those who can make it in person. Again, we're trying to really build on that interaction and building connections again. And we will follow up with an email to provide more information regarding the in-person meeting. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. So now we will be taking public comments on any of the agenda items. So if you have any public comment, feel free to use the raise hand function or put it in the chat. Okay, see none, we can go. Oh, sorry. I see Nick.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to loop back early on to the agenda today. There was an announcement about Mitsubishi Cement Corporation. I just wanted to kind of elevate and propose. I know there are some subcommittees on the CSC specific to the MCAS and SERP implementation. And, I think it would be really great to kind of bring back the conversation to that subcommittee to talk about, standards for new port tenants that are going to be coming in to our communities. And I think it would be great to kind of initiate those conversations up again. I believe those subcommittees have kind of been not meeting as frequently, but I think it would be great to kind of start that up and have those conversations.
Great, thank you, Nick. And yes, we can touch base with the APCD team too about this. Are there any other public comments?
So sorry, one more end.
No problem.
So there is an event happening in National City at Kimball Park, put on by the state, I believe, and I think APCD is also involved with it. It's about landscaper equipment. They're having a demo event for folks that have loved ones and friends that are landscapers and are interested in sharing information with them about how they can transition to electric equipment instead of using diesel equipment. It's a great opportunity to kind of share information out with them. And I can probably, I'll post a PDF of their advertisement, but it's coming up on January 29th, and it's going to be at Kimball Park. And I think they're going to be out there starting at 9 a.m. At the end of this month.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you for sharing. And if you would like us to send an email to CSC members, feel free to send that information to the facilitation team and we can send that out as well. All right, last call for public comments. Okay, see none. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. So I'll hand it over to Monique for closing remarks.
Thanks, Anna. I just want to say thank you to everyone. I know that, we have a lot of other things on our plate as well, and other things we could be doing, but I really appreciate your active participation. And like I said, I'd love to continue to stay in conversation with each of you. If you haven't already, please do reach out to me to schedule a one-on-one, but let's keep these lines of conversation going. Looking forward to seeing folks in person who are able to make it next month. Please do stay in conversation with us. And we will see you all hopefully next month. Thank you all.
Thank you, Monique, and thank you everyone for your participation today. And again, our next meeting will be February 28th. It will be hybrid, most likely in person. And again, we'll be sending out information in terms of location for the meeting. And we look forward to seeing you in person. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.